It was the night before Zendikar, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even... Oh, hey guys, how's it going? Scar here, coming at you with another Magic the Gathering video. And in today's video, we're actually going to be diving into Zendikar's mechanics overall as a whole, as we all patiently wait to crack open our packs and start building some decks in our actual accounts for MTG Arena. I figured I'd go over some mechanics for maybe some new players that are new to Magic the Gathering that haven't played Zendikar before, or even just a refresher for some people who haven't played Zendikar in a while and kind of forget how certain mechanics work. And Zendikar Rising kind of introduces some of the old mechanics from previous Zendikars, and it actually introduces a couple of new ones that actually are going to be kind of interesting, I think, overall as a whole for the format. So with that being said, guys, let's dive right into all the mechanics and break down each one individually. So we're right now diving right onto the Magic the Gathering website, and we're going to talk about model cards to start right off, or modal. I guess enunciations to each person, but modal cards are what they're calling the double face cards that are coming in with Zendikar Rising. And what that is essentially it's a card, as you kind of see here. Let's just use Valakut Awakening. It has the spell ability on one side, and as you kind of see in the bottom left hand corner, it actually has, with a little arrow, a tap in the red. It actually makes, you can actually play it as a red card. So essentially this card now, instead of having the Wizards of the Coast or the Magic the Gathering back, it now will have this on the back. So now you can use this card and actually have it enter the battlefield tap and now produce a red mana. So what this does, it kind of makes essentially these cards no longer dead cards. So if, for example, this card is not useful to you at this current state of the game, but you maybe want to play a land because you missed a land drop, you can now essentially play this as your land drop so you don't miss a land drop. Or if this card's not effective against the deck you're playing against, you can always just play it as a land and still make use of it until you get to maybe to the next game. If you're playing a best of 3, you can always sideboard it out when you want to replace it with something else. But given certain cards, you know, the ability to become one thing or the other, I think is essentially good. It does create this weird balance of non-basic lands. I don't know off the top of my head if there's any cards in the deck that are going to take advantage of people playing non-basic lands instead of basics, but you know, giving cards the ability to become a land and or a spell, you know, in the early game when it's not useful, in the late game you can always play for the spell when you have the mana. But I think this is going to be actually a pretty good mechanic overall as a whole. I think essentially I haven't played, you know, Zendikar Rising because I was unfortunate and didn't really reach out to try to get early access or anything for Zendikar Rising. But the thing with this is I'm going to assume when you play it, it's going to be almost like if you're playing anything with dual abilities, like Adventure and Mutate are probably the two that come up with me. It'll probably come up with the card, for example. You can either, it's probably going to come up with both cards on the screen. It'll probably come up with the reverse side, or come up with which is the land, or come up with the spell side. And it's going to like ask you, do you want to do this ability or do you want to do that ability? And depending on where your mana is, you can either cast it for its spell or you can always play it as the land. But the thing is, I don't know when it goes to the graveyard if it does count as a land, because I know there's certain cards that bring playing cards back from the graveyard to the battlefield. So that's another thing. I'm gonna wait and see how that plays out. But essentially, this is a mechanic that gives use to cards that normally would be dead in certain matchups, and kind of gives them a second ability. Or if it's not something you need at the time, like you drew like when you're some of these are very expensive. So if you drew one of these in the early game and you really don't need it at that time, you maybe have multiple copies, you can always just use it as a land to kind of still keep your mana base going, and then hopefully draw another copy of it later in the game to actually play its spell side. So it's pretty cool in that sense. The one thing I will say that's weird for physical Magic is that this is the token card that you're going to play in your deck if you want to actually play these modal cards, because essentially what you want is you want this card instead of like the double face card, because sometimes the plastic sleeves you put your cards in are see-through. You don't want to be able to see your modal card or have your opponent see your modal card as you hold it in your hand. But so this is like the token copy they're going to use it. You can use this card to represent a double face card and just have that card on the sideboard, or like in a separate pile as you play your games of Magic that you can then swap in as you play the card. So the next mechanic up that comes in Zendikar Rising, that's also a new mechanic, is actually the party mechanic. So what this mechanic is, it enters the battlefield, target creature +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature in your party. So what a party is, it consists of up to 1 cleric, a rogue, a warrior, and wizard. And I think each color plays a various amounts of this. From what I've seen, a lot of blue, a lot of black plays a lot of rogues. I think a lot of white is going to be playing a lot of warriors, possibly a lot of red as well. Clerics, I think, fall into the white and green, possibly, maybe even blue. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really like dove down and looked at each card and looked at like its overall, you know, this is a human warrior. I haven't like looked at that creature type and seen what like kind of area each one falls in. Now, as a whole, trying to get like certain, like, you know, one of each out on the battlefield to then have this trigger, you know, for the maximum, I feel is going to be a little bit on the tougher side. I mean, maybe in more limited play where there's less removal, it may be a little bit easier, but on the basis of, you know, let's just say you're playing like Dimir Rogues or Grixis Rogues. I'm not really sure which of the two are the better. I think a lot of people are saying Dimir Rogues just because of the synergy with just playing 2 colors instead of 3 colors. But there's a lot of rogues, and there's, I think, a couple other you know, warriors and things like that in each of those colors, and also wizards. So essentially that deck is maybe a higher chance to have a good chunk of the party. Even if you have like a rogue and a warrior on the battlefield, still triggering that ability twice is still beneficial. I think there's a rogue one that actually makes your opponent reveal a card from their hand equal to the amount of cards in your party, and then you get to choose one of the cards that they reveal based on how many cards you know how many each type is in your party, and then you have to discard that card. So that's a pretty cool effect. And if you have additional copies or additional you know, types of these things in your party, you're gonna get double the triggers. So definitely cool in that sense. Here's like that one of those things. This spell costs 1 less for each card in creature in your party. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, shuffle your library. If you have a full party, you may cast that spell with root mana cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. That's a pretty cool mechanic. The chances though that you have 4 is hard just because of maybe spot removal and things like that. But on the chance that you can pay this for 1, pretty much searching your library for any card, essentially, even possibly a card that costs 4 or less, and playing it for free, is definitely a cool idea. This card, for example, if you play maybe Golgari, like maybe a Golgari like Golgari style deck, this card itself counts as each one, so it may just say creature elf, but it says on its like actual ability that it's a cleric, rogue, warrior ability. It has kicker 3, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, reveal top 6 cards of your library. We put a card that shares a creature type with it from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So essentially, this is a card that helps you dig a little bit deeper in your deck, but then also helps build your party up initially. It does have 2 toughness, so it is you know, boltable or something like that to kind of get off the field. But you know, essentially, party could be a good thing in that sense. We'll just kind of see how it plays out. This actually has the next ability that I'm actually going to talk about, and that is its kicker. So essentially what kicker is, you can pay the spell for its normal mana cost, which for example this Gnarled Colony is a 2 mana 2/2, but you can pay the kicker a 3, and what this does is it does this additional ability. It says if this card was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter has trample. So essentially for 5 mana you can get a 4/4 trampler, but essentially gives all your other creatures with a trample +1/+1. Another interesting ability, just looking at this, is counters in general. I'm wondering how this will trigger with the guy from M21. His name is escaping my head, but he's the green and white card that whenever you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, you put additional +1/+1 counter on it. So this could be an interesting card to use in a +1/+1 counter style deck. But you know, it's pretty cool in that sense that you simply get additional counters if you have the additional mana, which maybe makes this guy maybe in the early game not, you know, he's not really he's good early game card, but if you have the additional mana, maybe you're playing the late game, you're not really drawing too much. You know, being able to play a 4/4 for 5 mana, you know, using your mana efficiently is always good. This is a Might of Mursa. This is an instant spell that costs 2 mana. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If the spell is kicked, it gets +1/+5 instead. So essentially just making it even better. Essentially, you know, using more of your mana. I'm sure there's better cards that have better kickers, and I know there's a rare card that actually it's like kind of like it takes benefit of when you cast a spell that has a kicker. You can remove counters from it, make copies of the spell you cast or permanent, and essentially, you know, you can turn this card now that you kicked it for 5 mana into a +10/+10, which is pretty ridiculous. But overall, it gives flexibility to spells to make them even stronger. So I think kicker is going to be a good thing. The Jace has a kicker ability, so that's pretty cool. So that will make Jace very good, because I think his kicker gives him a token copy, and then it's essentially Jace, but it has like 1 loyalty. You can plus it to scry, and I think you can 0 it to draw a card, and you minus loyalty equal to the spell's converted mana cost. So that's definitely cool to have 2 Jaces on the battlefield. That one doesn't count as legendary because it's a token copy. But overall, I think kicker is going to be a good mechanic, just making things just that little bit more powerful, making you utilize your mana better, getting additional effects overall. And the final mechanic that is coming into MTG Arena is a Landfall. It's pretty much a very straightforward mechanic. Landfall, like when this card, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control with this card, this will deal 1 damage to each opponent. triggering this with something like Fable Passage. So essentially, you know, you play Fable Passage or even Evolve in Wilds, that initial, when you play it in the battlefield, will trigger Landfall. You can crack it now to search your library for the basic land card, put it on the battlefield, which will trigger another Landfall ability. And, you know, essentially now you're just put a multiple lands on a battlefield in turn. There is also the 2-mana snake that, you know, whenever you play a land has a landfall ability, you create a mana of any color. Same concept. You can kind of do a little ramp. You play things like Cultivate, which puts a land on the battlefield. It synergizes as well with Uro. I think the new Omnath also has a landfall ability. Nissa has a landfall ability. So landfall is, I think going to be a very good ability overall as a whole. I think it's just one of those abilities that's a pretty cool static. You know, there's not really too much more you have to do other than just play something. But overall, I mean, Landfall is going to be a very good ability. All right, with that being said, guys, I mean, let me know what you guys think is going to be maybe a mechanic that you're interested in overall as a whole. I think each one of these mechanics has a certain place as I think it's going to fit into the meta as a whole. I think overall, the hardest one to have a full party for the party mechanic is going to be the toughest. But I see that there's cards that will help make that party mechanic a little bit easier. But let me know down in the comments below which mechanic you're excited to kind of build around and play with. You know, we'll kind of see how this plays out in limited. I would say essentially either Landfall or even maybe like the modal mechanic is gonna be very interesting for that, just making limited a little bit more interesting as a whole. But with that being said, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. If you want to post more videos, hit that subscribe button, and I can't wait for Zendikar Rising tomorrow.